Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to let people come in to the webinar this afternoon. Really pleased to be here. First one we've done this year at noon. We've listened to people who gave us feedback on previous webinars that noon was a good time. Kia ora, I'm Craig Young. I'm the CEO of 2Ns. If you haven't seen or met me before, probably most of you will have. And I'm really thrilled today to be joined by my good friend Vic McClellan, who is going to coordinate and the webinar. At the moment, we've got 4 faces on the screen at the moment, and we're also joined by Sophie Ricketts and Kim Anderson-Smith, who are from our Christchurch leadership team, our FLINT leadership team, who are going to help Vic today in this session, who have volunteered. Well, let's just say Sophie didn't really volunteer, but she's here. So Vic today is the founder and managing director of Optimal BI. She'll probably bring you up to speed on a few of those things. I've known her for a few years, and we've had this webinar presented live to our Waikato and Wellington teams in past events, and it's gone down incredibly well. And I know every time I hear Vic speak on this, I get something else out of it. And even though I've been doing this networking thing for many years, there's always something else you can pick up. So I'm going to hand over to Vic. If you do want to, sorry, I should say, if you come across questions as we go, please do put them in the Q&A, and we will be able to answer those at the end. So don't be shy in using the Q&A section of the webinar. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Vic.
Kia ora, and thanks, Craig. Thanks for introducing me. Kia ora koutou, ko Victoria McLennan, toko ingoa, but please call me Vic. I'm just going to do the technology thing of sharing my screen and hope it works, because you never know how these things happen. How are we? Can we see? Awesome. Craig's giving me a thumbs up. So it's really weird presenting in the Zoom world, I'd have to say, having done it quite a few times since we went into lockdown just over a year ago now. And that the difference between running a workshop or a seminar when you're in person and you can see the reactions on people's faces, you can see when people are dozing off or when they're playing with their phones, and not being able to see you is quite weird and wonderful if you haven't had this opportunity. So it's great for me that I can see Craig, Sophie and Kim while presenting this workshop. Now, as Craig said, having run this a couple of times before, I had a look for the slides, which I'm using exactly the same ones as before. They're pretty simple slides. It's basically me talking to a set of bullet points. It's 2 years since we've run one of these sessions, which is quite a long time. And what a changing 2 years it's been. So who could have imagined 2 years ago, when I was up in Waikato with a room full of FLINT members, that we would be in a world where we would all be locked down and in our homes and only interacting with each other for a good period of 3 to 4 months via technology and not seeing other people in person. And then only now, a year later, are starting to attend events again. And to be fair, I haven't attended a large in-person event yet this year. And I'm sure that some of you might be like me, feeling like, yes, there are events again. Yes, I should probably start going to them, but I'm just not quite ready. I can completely understand that anxiety and apprehension that some of you might have. We're very lucky to live in New Zealand. We're very lucky that this is a COVID-free country predominantly, and that we are able to have these events again. So hopefully these tips will be useful for when you do feel the need to go and venture out and meet other people. So as Craig said, to tell you a little bit about myself, the way that I tend to introduce myself is with who I am first, ko Victoria McLennan, toko ingoa, but please call me Vic, and that I'm an owner and investor of some small to medium enterprises, predominantly in the digital technology space. And I donate a lot of my time to philanthropic activities in the digital education space, because I firmly believe that we live in a great country where everyone should have an opportunity to realise their potential. And I believe education is the pathway to realising that potential. And because I'm an old techo from many, many years ago, digital technology is where I naturally tend to spend my time and can add the most value. So I just wanted to give a shout out on this slide to my main passion project, so a charitable trust called Digital Future Aotearoa, which has a number of programs we run. And thank you very much to Flint, who I know you've donated some money in the past from some of your activities to Code Club Aotearoa, which is a network of volunteers around the country. And if any of you are a Code Club volunteer, thank you very much for sharing that time. And those volunteers teach kids to code in after school and in classroom programs with teachers. We also have Electric Garden, which are Internet of Things devices that are deployed in school veggie gardens, and they teach learners how to grow things from seed, but also monitor that growing through the IoT devices. Do they need to water their carrots or their kumara or their sunflowers? And then the latest initiative that we've collaborated on is Recycle a Device, where corporates and other organisations who have unused laptops can donate them, and then those laptops are repurposed by secondary school students, and those students learn about digital technology and how to repurpose laptops, and then they're involved in the distribution of those laptops to whānau in their communities. And it's a fantastic, powerful program, and really, really pleased to have got that off the ground and support it. And a couple of other hats that I wear. And one is co-chair of NZ Rise, which is where Craig and I work together a lot as industry group leaders. I own a few companies and am director of some others in the tech space. So to the networking tips. The first tip is around being prepared before you go. And actually many of these tips are for you to prepare before you go. And the first one is about having a personal elevator pitch. And so that's when you walk into a room and you may or may not know other people in the room, and you join a group of people to basically initiate conversation with them or have a chat with them. And you always find that you need to introduce yourself. And that's one of the things that in the past, I personally, and the reason I have it as my number one, have fluffed, because I do so many things and I wear so many hats. People get confused about what I'm trying to tell them. So for me, before I arrive in an event, I rehearse still. This is after, you can see I've got grey hair, many years of attending networking events. I rehearse what elevator pitch I'm going to use on the day. And that can vary depending on the audience. It can vary depending on whether I think I know other people who are there, or whether I know that I'm going into a room where I hardly know anyone, and I'll talk to you about some tips for that shortly. But I will rehearse how I'm going to introduce myself today. So if I'm going to an event in the philanthropy space, I will tend to have an elevator pitch that talks about my philanthropic activities that I do. If I'm going to something at government, I will tend to talk about myself as a business owner. So depending on what kind of event. Now, my two wonderful volunteers have very kindly been voluntold, or voluntel, I think is the correct term, that they can also practice their personal elevator pitches for you. So normally in this networking exercise, when we're in a group activity, I would get you to all practice to each other now. And what I will ask all of you to do when you go away from here is practice your personal elevator pitch every time you meet someone new. So get it really clear in your mind, the structure of what you're going to say, who you are, what you do, and one interesting thing about you. And then practice it with people that you meet, not only in networking situations, but just a new person you meet at the water cooler, a virtual water cooler at work, or a new person that you meet in the weekend at a barbecue, or a new person that you meet on a Zoom call in a meeting this afternoon. So we'll cut to my volunteers. So Sophie, would you like to go first with your personal elevator pitch practice?
Sure thing, Vic, no problem. So for me, I come across circumstances where I need to introduce myself all the time. Not long ago, I started a new job, so I felt like I was doing this pretty much 7 times a day for the first couple of weeks. So for me, that would probably go something like this. Hi, I'm Sophie. I've got a history of working in leadership and people management. I've got a beautiful greyhound. And when I'm not in the office, you can definitely find me either singing with a band or performing on stage.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophie. Lovely to meet you. Now, Kim, would you like to share yours?
Hi. Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. I would usually start my elevator pitch by introducing myself. So, kia ora koutou, ko Kim toku ingoa. My name is Kim. I'm currently working on a startup / passion project in textile waste and reusing it. And a fun fact about me is I'm studying law whilst a few years after I dropped out of school. So busy at the moment.
Thank you. Kia ora, Kim. That's fantastic. So as you will have all heard, they both introduce themselves with their name first quite clearly, and something that they do, both in different order, and something that they're passionate about, and a thing that they do outside of a work situation. So one of the things that's really important when you are meeting people, and depending on the context, is they might not be able to connect with you in what your job is and what you do for a job, but they may be able to connect with the fact that you happen to have a greyhound, and they may also like rescuing animals, or have a neighbour with a rescued greyhound, or a really lovely story that they can connect with you on that level. So by offering some information about yourself professionally, as well as yourself personally, it gives people different opportunities to connect with you. So personal elevator pitch, your homework from here is to practice it, and to practice it when you meet other people, and to modify it, because modifying is something that we all need to do for different circumstances. That's tip number one. Tip number two, and this is really, really important. So if you're invited to an event, and either you're nervous about going to the event because you know that you won't know anyone there, or you're nervous about going to the event because you just don't do small talk and you don't really enjoy having to meet new people and start a conversation with them, or if you just like to have company when you go to things, I recommend that you take a buddy. 90% or more, probably 99% of events that you're invited to, the host will happily allow you to bring someone else if you ask them. And that's really key for me, because I do organise, or pre-COVID used to organise a lot of events and invite people, and it's really respectful to go back to the person who invited you, or the host, or via whatever MailChimp system they sent it to you. There will have been an email address for further contact, to go back and say, can I please bring, I would love to come, can I please bring my colleague? You don't really have to explain why you want to bring your colleague or your friend, just can I please bring my colleague or my friend, their name is blah. And you'll find that 99% of the time you will get a positive response, and they will say, yes, that's fine. Because when you're in event management, it's really variable how many people are going to turn up on the day anyway. If it's a free event that people aren't paying money to attend, then your attendance can be variable depending on the weather and all sorts of other factors. So as I said, 99% of the time you'll get a yes, and you can take a buddy. And as we go through some of these other tips, I'll talk a bit more about how your buddy can be useful to you, but they can be useful when it's the bravery of two of you muscling up to a group and saying hi and introducing yourself. They can also be useful, which I'll talk about a bit more for you if you want to get yourself out of a situation, your buddy's on the other side of the room, then you can make eye contact with them. And they can just be useful if you can't find anyone else to talk to, but you can still go and listen to the speakers and eat the free food and drink moderate amounts of the free wine. So bringing a buddy is really important. Sometimes you will get knocked back. Sometimes they get invited to things that say, this is an invite for you only, do not share this, or pass it on to anyone else, and you cannot bring a +1. But that's really, really unusual. That's usually something that's seated, like the Prime Minister's pre-budget talk in a couple of weeks' time, that the invite was really clear that this was an invite to me personally. I can't share it with anyone else, and I can't bring anyone along, but really unusual for that to happen. Make sure whoever you invite to come along with you is appropriate to go to the event with you. So it may not be the best thing sometimes to take your flatmate to a business thing if your flatmate's going to turn up wearing shorts and jandals and and a t-shirt, when the business event everyone else is wearing smart casual or smart attire. So you need to think about who your buddy might be and whether they're appropriate. Always really nice to take a colleague. You could take someone you've met at a FLINT event, for example, that you've formed a good working relationship with, or a colleague from work. So you need to think about the appropriateness of who the buddy you take is. But I recommend that if you're not comfortable walking into a new situation, that you do take a buddy. So that's networking tip number 2. And if you have any questions, as Craig said, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll address the questions at the end. Right, the next thing that's really important before you go is to research the event and question yourself as to why you're attending. Now, if you're just attending for the free food and booze, that's a little bit disingenuous. It's really important if you've been invited to something that's outside of your company or outside of the area that you normally work in, that you understand something about the organisation or that has invited you, and do some research about the host. So the last thing you want to do is walk in and be greeted personally by a host at the door and you not know a thing about them or their organisation or their foundation or whatever they've invited you for. Or if it's a fundraiser, for example, that you're invited to, and you don't know anything about the fundraiser, because that is a really important thing that you can be discussing with other complete strangers that you meet. So I strongly recommend that you're already going forearmed as forewarned, that you go having done some research about who's invited you, who the key players that might be attending are, what the event's about, what the purpose and outcome of it is. And then all of that is really, really useful for making small talk. So if, for example, you were invited to the opening of a new venue or a new building, doing a little bit of research on who commissioned that building or venue or who's running that venue means that when you meet people, there's a point of conversation that you can say, oh, it's really interesting that organisation ABC is running this venue. They also run that other venue on the other side of town. I really like that venue, for example. If you're going to a FLINT event, obviously you already know what it's all about, but there might be a specific topic for that FLINT event on a particular day, such as this one was about networking. So having been forearmed and having done a little bit of research as to why you want to be here means that you can make the most of it and get the most out of it. Obviously, we're not networking with each other today because it's a bit of a webinar, but most events, when you're meeting people in person, it just gives you that point of common interest to have a bit of a chat with them and discussion topics. Which leads us nicely into conversation starters. So it's sounding like I'm giving you lots of homework to do before you even attend an event, but honestly, your enjoyment and what you get out of it will completely vary depending on how much prep you've done. So conversation starters and having them up your sleeve is just really a key to success and not feeling really awkward when you're needing to introduce yourself to people. So you've already got your elevator pitch and how you're going to describe yourself. And that in itself may lead to some conversation starters. But sometimes when you're standing around in a group of strangers that you don't really know, and you find yourself all looking at your feet, it's really good to have something that you can stimulate some discussion by starting a conversation with. Now, when Trump was a president, it was really easy because every couple of weeks he would do something and you could just say to any group of people that you've never met before, what about Trump? And it just sets them off. Like it was an incredibly useful, powerful conversation starter because people are polarized about the guy. Obviously, we don't have him in the world anymore. We do have COVID, and that's an interesting one and very common, and everyone has a level of understanding about it. So depending on how controversial or not you want to be, you could throw something into the mix about COVID, like you can make a comment about what was in the news today, and at the moment it's about India, and you can say, isn't it terrible about the COVID numbers in India continuing to escalate, or isn't it terrible about how India is really struggling to get access to enough oxygen for people in the hospital, and that will start a conversation on COVID. Or you could take a softer approach on COVID and just talk about the bubble with Australia and just say to people, so you're going to take advantage of the bubble, you're planning a trip to Australia, and that will start a conversation potentially about COVID and trips outside of Aotearoa. The big thing to say there is, if you do pick something that's slightly controversial, then you might find that people have a polarizing view to you, and you might find yourself in an argument or a discussion that you're not really comfortable being in. So be prepared if you want to pick a controversial topic. There are safe topics that you can choose as well. So the weather is the universal safe topic. And today I've been in a meeting all morning, and I'd have to say we did dedicate the first 5 minutes at 8 o'clock this morning to the 4-hour meeting I've just been in, talking about how cold it was in different parts of the country, because there were people in the South Island who were like, it's -5 degrees right now or something, or it's still -1 inside. And the weather is easy and it's fairly neutral, and everybody has an opinion about the weather. You can make it slightly controversial and make a comment about when the weather forecast is all wrong about today, if it's raining outside and the forecast was that it was going to be a lovely sunny day, for example. But fundamentally, what I recommend is that you go to any event that you attend with 3 conversation starters in mind. And the reason I suggest 3 is because you might find that you're the only person in the group that you find yourself standing in that starts a conversation. So have a couple up your sleeve. The other reason is because the first one that you use, you might find you get a really polarizing reaction to. And so you need to move to something that's a little bit more moderate. So having the range of different thoughts up your sleeve is really important. And the other reason is you might find yourself moving around a room and talking to different people, and you don't really want to be having the COVID conversation with every single group that you speak to. So this is where my fabulous volunteers come in again today, and I have asked them both to prepare a conversation starter to speak to each other. So we'll start with Kim. If you can start a conversation with Sophie first, that would be great.
This is a more controversial conversation starter. So
Excellent.
I'd be like, hey, Sophie, the vaccine, do you think that you're going to be getting it?
Oh, absolutely. I am super pro-vaccination. I think it's really amazing that we live in a country where we don't even have to think twice about accessibility. It's going to be rolled out for free. How about you?
See, I'm an anti-vaxxer.
Interesting. And is that because of how you were raised, or has something in your life directly influenced that choice?
Ooh, see, good.
Now, so that was good from a keeping it going. Sophie, one of the things I would usually suggest to people is they err away from ever asking people about how they were raised or asking questions about religion, because that sometimes makes people feel really uncomfortable. So I agree with you digging into why is she an anti-vaxxer, which, Kim, you're just so brave saying that out loud in front of however many people are watching this. Whether it's true or not. But I would probably have not asked the question on how you were raised, because that could have opened up a number of other cans of worms. But obviously we're in safe company right now. So that was great. Now, Sophie, have you prepared a conversation starter to ask him?
I have. Did you watch the Oscars, or have you been following the hot news from the telecast on Monday?
Yeah, it was amazing that the best international feature film was Another Round. I think it was a great film.
For me, I was the most excited about the best documentary. I really, really wanted My Octopus Teacher to win, and it did. Did you see that on Netflix?
No, I didn't, sorry, but I will definitely add that to the watch list.
It's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you both very much. I really, really appreciate you demonstrating that. So Netflix is another really good topic, or just what have you been watching recently is another really good topic, or has anyone seen any good shows recently or good movies recently? When we ran this last time, if I remember rightly, in Waikato, we were just about at the end of Game of Thrones. And so as I moved around the group, lots of people were having really polarizing Game of Thrones conversations. So if there's something that's massive that the whole world's watching, which might have been Tiger King a year ago, of course, then bringing those up as conversation starters will definitely get people talking. So, and potentially get some really good debate going, and you might then be able to just participate in that conversation. So that was tip number 4. Tip number 5 is a really important one, and I'll particularly direct this to women around having exit options. So sometimes you find yourself in a group having a conversation that you're really uncomfortable with. Someone might be asking you some really, really direct questions. Both men and women do that. Sometimes you might find yourself being mansplained to, and most women will understand what mansplaining is. And you just want to get yourself out of there. And so one of the things that I think is really important when you walk into an event and when you walk into a venue is to actually scan the room before you go and join a group or a conversation. So walk around the room is a really good way of doing it. And then it gives you an idea of, you can see if there's anyone you know or your friend who you thought was going to be there is actually there. But also the things I want you to look for are where the bar is, where the food table is, because there's always going to be a food table of some description, or if not a food table, where the food's coming out from, where the kitchen direction is, and where the bathrooms are. So, and if you do have friends that are there, spot where they are roughly in the room and kind of keep an eye on where they are in the room. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling really uncomfortable, and you just want to get out of this conversation that you're in, invoke one of many exit options. So I just want to go and refill my drink. So scull your drink quickly and then go, I just want to go and refill my drink, or I just need a glass of water, and head straight for the bar. If there was a food table, you can use that. I haven't eaten since breakfast. I've desperately got to go and get some snacks. Excuse me, I'll go and get some food. Whether you see a friend or not, you can always use I've just seen a friend of mine over there. I'm going to go and say hello, or someone I haven't seen for years over there. I'm just going to go and say hello. And then there's always the age-old, excuse me, I've got to go to the bathroom. So saying something polite so that the other person isn't heightened to the fact that you're actually trying to exit the conversation is really good, so that then they're less likely to follow you, and they're less likely to track you down later if you're polite about your exit. I think that's really important. But yeah, just being really clear where you are in the room, who and what is around you, and then if you say, I'm going to go and get a drink, making a beeline for the bar. So if they happen to glance, they see that you're going to the bar rather than you walking off in the opposite direction to the bar, and then they'll be wondering what's going on here. Is just a clean way of getting out of a conversation that you don't want to be in, or a situation you don't want to be in. And as women, unfortunately, we do find ourselves sometimes, unfortunately, in situations with men who may have drunk a little bit too much, or may just be a little bit too full of themselves. And sometimes for young women, I know for women like me in their 50s, it doesn't happen, getting hit on by men that you're not comfortable about that situation that you're in. So just be really prepared with your exit options. So there you go, there's homework you do as you're walking in the door as well. You'll come to realize that networking is all about homework and preparation. So tip number 6 is to thank the host. Now, it may seem really nuanced and a little odd, but if you enjoyed the event you're at and you want to be invited back, it's a really good idea to find the host at some point during the event. So if it was at a particular business that's invited you, or at a society, or even at a FLINT event, find the person who is ultimately the organizer. If there's an organising committee, find a member of that organising committee and thank them. And they're far more likely to invite you back again, believe me. If you don't thank them, they might invite you back again, but they'll notice you and they'll think they were really polite and they really enjoyed being there. When you go and thank them because you've done your research about their organisation or about the event, you can say something profound and insightful, or just say something simple like, I really enjoyed this, the food was fantastic, or the atmosphere is great, or the music was at totally the right level. Because you know how sometimes you go to things and the music's really loud and you can't hear each other speak and you're yelling. Just say something as well as thanking them very much for letting you come along, and they might then want to stop and have a chat with you, but respect the fact that if they are the host, they're probably really, really busy and they've got lots of people to talk to and lots of other things to do. And if you're like me and you live in Wellington, you go to a lot of events with government, they may have a minister or someone that they need to be hosting a little bit more closely. So take the opportunity to thank them, and believe me, you're far more likely to be invited back. I can tell you that with events that I run anyway. People who thank me go on my little list of they did the right thing. Tip number 7, which is really can be quite hard in a loud situation, or can be quite hard in a conversation that you're not enjoying and you're a little bit bored with, is actively listen. So the reason I include this as a tip is because you never know who the person that you've just met might be to you in a future life. So they may be someone that you apply for a job, the next job you apply for, they may be the person who's interviewing for that job, or they may turn out to be a great contact because you desperately want to sell something to their organisation and they're a person that can be a conduit for you to get connections into that organisation. Lots of reasons why it's good to respect and listen to the other person just from a social etiquette perspective, but also the fact that you never know how important they're going to be. And I think it's really, the conversation goes a lot better if you do actively listen to the other person so that you can respond to them intelligently and make some sensible responses and comments, or you can actively listen, and if they're saying something you think is really inappropriate, you can call them out, or you can use that as your opportunity to exit. But definitely the last thing that you want to be is that person, if you're talking and someone else is standing next to you and nodding, but they're not really listening to you at all, and you suddenly realize they're not listening to me at all, why am I even talking to them? Just don't be that person. It's not cool. So actively listen to the other people in the conversation that you're with. And I can't remember whether this is my last tip or not, but we might still be going. And drinking appropriately. Now, it might sound like I'm a bit of a mother telling you to suck eggs, but there's nothing worse than drinking too much at an event, and it's easy to do because you might be really nervous or uncomfortable, or there might be lots of awkward silences, or the beer or wine might be really, really good. The worst place to get drunk is at a work event, I can tell you that, because your boss and your boss's boss and all of their colleagues are there and they're watching, and you might say something that you would normally moderate yourself phenomenally with and not say, because a little bit of alcohol has given you a little bit of courage that you that you wouldn't have otherwise said something, and you might regret it the next day. So no matter what the event, whether the booze is free or not, my advice is to always drink appropriately. If you are drinking and you want to have a couple of wines or beers, then I suggest you do actually eat some food while you're there. If you notice that your buddy that you brought along or your friend that you're there with has had a bit much to drink, and you're worried about them making a comment to their boss that's inappropriate, or hitting on someone inappropriately, then I would also say that you should monitor your buddy and your friends and just give them a little bit of a nudge and maybe put some food in front of them if you think they need to. The last thing you want to do is leave something and regret that you've drunk too much and you've said the wrong thing or behaved in the wrong way. And again, back to my point before, that person you're talking to might be the person you turn up to a job interview with in 2 weeks' time, and they will remember that you got really, really drunk and you were really embarrassing at that function. So just remember to drink appropriately. Oh no, I'm still going. So on that, drink appropriately, I guess the other way to extend that is don't burn your bridges. So it's easy when you've got your guard down and when you're in a different situation to get yourself into a heated discussion with someone. And I know I've given you some advice that you can bring up some controversial topics, but my advice would be, even if you do bring up those controversial topics, or even if you do challenge and have an opposing opinion, but still be respectful. So back to all of those points that I've just made about the other people who are there may have influence in your life, or you may have influence in their lives. It's really important to still be respectful and just don't burn your bridges. Don't do anything that you're going to regret. Don't, back to that point about don't tell your boss all the things that you've wished you've said all year at the Christmas do and unload them all at once because you've had a couple too many drinks, and then have to go to work and see them on Monday morning and kind of seek forgiveness. It's just not worth it. So my advice is don't ever at a networking event burn your bridges. And finally, number 10, and most importantly, is try and have some fun, because usually events we go to are in our personal time, they're at lunchtime or after work. Usually they can be really stimulating. You can meet some really, really interesting people. You can have interactions with people that you may have seen in the media, or you've read their articles, or you've heard about them, or you've read their blogs. The number of times I've had people who have come up to me and said, I read your blog about something, or I follow you on Twitter. And that's really awesome. And if you can be brave, and if you see those people, then do go and introduce yourself and have some fun, make it fun, smile lots. Smiles really, really do help you break down barriers with people who feel socially awkward. And if you see other people who are like you that are feeling really uncomfortable and kind of lurking around the edges and not knowing how to break into a conversation, go and talk to them and go with them together to break into something, and so that you can both potentially have some fun at that event together. So that's it. I think I've raced through my time and given you far too much homework to all go away with, I'm quite sure. But remember, preparation is key. The more prep you do, the more fun you'll have and the more value you'll get out of the event at the time. And I will now unshare my screen.
Well, kia ora, thanks, Vic. There are a couple of questions. Sophie's been amazing and answered some of them as well, but we might just check back in with you as well, see what your view is as well. So one of them was around the exit strategy one. What do you do if they do follow you to the bar or food area, for example?
Yeah, so that personal security stuff and that exit strategy can be quite challenging. So if you do have someone follow you to the bar or the food area, my recommendation would be polite, get some food, get one little thing and have a nibble on it, or get the drink and maybe have a drink of it, and then exit yourself to the bathrooms. It's very unlikely they'll follow you to the bathrooms. And when you come back from the bathroom, be really strategic about the path that you take so that you don't go past that person again. Now, if you are feeling really uncomfortable and this person is continuing to follow you or hit on you or annoy you in some way, there's a few things you can do. You can go and find one of your friends or someone that you already know who's in the room and just get a personal shield around you with that other person. You can go and find the host if you know who the host is, or go back to the reception table. Most events you go to, there'll be someone who signed you in and gave you a name tag. Go back to them and say that this person is making me feel really uncomfortable. You can, if you feel, if it's not a sexual connotation or something if it's just that they've got a really opposing view and they really want to argue or point out with you, you can bravely just turn around to them and say, I'm not comfortable with this conversation. I'm going to move myself somewhere else because I don't want to continue having this conversation with you. And in most situations, most people will be so shocked by the fact that you just said that to them. Some people will be surprised to hear that they're behaving in a way that it's impacting you that badly. And so they will actually back off, immediately when you do that. I have had a person in the past who, over a series of many years, used to come and pick arguments with me, had very polarizing views to me. And at one point, I got some advice from someone else to confront them about that. And so I did, not at an event in the moment, but at another opportunity that was created. I confronted them and said, you make me feel phenomenally uncomfortable and you make me not want to go to events because you keep confronting me about these things and arguing with me. And he backed off completely and now kind of nods at me and doesn't even come and talk to me at events. So didn't apologize, but he obviously hadn't realized how far he'd gone and how far he'd crossed the line. So that's a great question. Really difficult if you're in that situation.
And good to see that you and Sophie were pretty much on the same page on the answer. And there's one final one that was there was, I don't drink. Is it okay to network without drinking?
Absolutely. And I don't drink on weekdays. So that's been my thing for the last few years. And so I network without drinking all the time. There is something in having a glass in your hand though. And if you don't want people, if you feel like there's social pressure that you should be drinking, what I tend to do is get a wine glass and pour water in it. Even when it's a managed bar, you'll be able to get an empty wine glass off them and pour water in it and walk around with a glass of water or a glass of lemonade and a champagne flute, and just makes it look like you're drinking, but you're not actually drinking. Honestly, so many people don't drink these days. It's actually not socially awkward in any way, shape or form to not be drinking. And you can have just as much fun and enjoy the event just as much without drinking. So yeah, absolutely recommend it.
It's a great reminder to those of us that host events that we need to cater for non-alcoholic options as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I say to some people, trick for young players, I do a lot of work with startups who like to host events when they're really excited or they've just done a raise, is not to have spirits. So if you're a host, just don't have spirits. No. Just people get messy really quickly. So stick with beer and wine and only a couple of options, and have lots of non-alcoholic drinks.
Yeah. Well, look, that's the question. So what we'll do is we'll just go around, Sophie and Kim, then come back to Vic as just on if there's any final thoughts or comments or anything you want to make. We'll give Sophie and Kim the option. So Sophie, have you got anything you want to finish up with?
Yeah, I do. For me, just another type of perspective to consider, because obviously I know we've got like almost 40 people logged into this webinar today. For me, I'm super extroverted. So one of the reasons why Craig asked me if I would be willing to take part in this webinar is because I don't have any hesitation doing this kind of stuff. Networking in any type of social situation, whether it's professional or more casual, it doesn't faze me at all. I know that I thrive in those environments. So if you feel like any of that resonates a bit with you, if you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm quite extroverted and I'm quite confident, and I would say it's really even more important that you think about the way you're actively listening. And it's also really, really important that you make sure that you're not dominating the conversation. So it's really, really great to stimulate with some conversation starters and to try and extract information, in a fun, engaging way with the other people that you're chatting with. But it's also important to kind of keep that perspective of, if you're a natural talker, make sure that it's not just your voice, and make sure that, when you're walking away, you're actually retaining some of the information. What was their name? Where do they work? What was the thing you had in common? Because if you walk away from that and think, oh, that was really fun, and I had a free drink and had a bunch of cheese, and I don't really remember the details of any of the people I talked to, it means you probably didn't take advantage of it in the right way.
Cool. Kim, you got anything you want to finish up with?
Yeah, on that note, I'm quite introverted in the way I am in new engagements and networking. So I definitely recommend introducing yourself and talking. If you are sitting in the corner, there are a lot of people that feel the same way as you. So definitely just make the first move to go and start that conversation. and getting someone's LinkedIn, sorry, and following up with them on there is a really good way to hold the conversation and maybe talk to them in future events.
Cool.
Thanks.
In fact, there was one last question just about conversation starters. Do you have any other go-to ones?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I was going to say I avoid talking about children, so that's a not go-to. But if someone else starts talking about children and you've got children and you're interested in children, then feel free. And that often takes on a whole new world and life when people have children in common to talk about. So I depending on where you live, there will be something going on in your town. So if you're in Wellington, you can talk about our council, you can talk about the fact that we have no decent infrastructure. You can, you just make kind of open statements like, what do you think about the mayor? And honestly, that just gets people going. You can make open statements like, what's everyone doing this weekend? And that will get people to respond. You can make it something about the event you're at, like if you're invited by a particular person, how do you all know Craig? And that also creates another instant connection and a way of responding. So I saw on the question that they said, do I have a top 10 list? I might post a top 10 list on LinkedIn. And I'll get Craig to share that with you. I don't have a platform I'm blogging on at the moment, so I thought I could share that on LinkedIn, which we're all on. And do anyone who's watching, feel free to send me a LinkedIn connection, but please add a note as to where you heard me speaking, because I get lots every day and I ignore them if there's no note. So I think that's a really polite networking thing as well, giving people context.
Here's another tip you can add to your networking thing, which is when you connect on LinkedIn, remind them where you met them.
Yeah, really, really important, because for some people you just meet so many people or don't meet people. Yeah. And so you're getting that reminder, just they're like, oh, that's right. Because quite often I'll be at an event and I'll say to someone, oh yeah, I'll send you something about that. And then I promptly forget the next day. But if you send me a wee LinkedIn note, then I'll send you that link straight away.
Cool. Is there anything else you wanted to finish up with, Vic, before I close up?
The only other thing was to Sophie's point, because I'm like a little bit like you, Sophie, I do speak and I'm not good with silences. Is a wise man once said to me, ask yourself why you're speaking before you speak. So I try to be very careful with that. As if you are an extrovert and you are a person who speaks without being spoken to, other people do like the silence and they like a few seconds to process what they're thinking. So let the silence happen for a few moments before you jump in and fill that silence all the time. So that's my message to the extroverts out there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more in the Kim shop, where as much as I do networking a lot, and I'm used to getting out and talking to people, I do occasionally like to take a few seconds to just process before I speak. Which is a good thing. And I did like Kim's comment in the chat, which was she listens to understand rather than listening to respond, which I thought was a really good comment. Hey, look, I'd just like to thank everybody. What we'll do is after the event, those of you that attended will email you out the link to the recording on YouTube, but also what I might do in that email is just list the 10 tips as well, just so you get that, rather than, because you may not have taken notes and gone, oh, I wished I'd taken notes. So we'll do that as well. And as I said, that video will be on YouTube. It just falls to me to thank, first of all, Sophie and Kim for being prepared and willing to step out. Well, I was going to say their comfort zone, but for Sophie, it's not really. This is what she likes to do. So thank you so much, and particularly to Vic, because I know Vic is incredibly busy, and so we're just so thankful for your time, Vic, and for giving it today. So it just falls to me to say kia ora and mā te wā.
Ka kite anō.